Peter Brock, Australia's King of the Mountain. To most Holden fans, he's untouchable, a legend who could do no wrong. But what if I told you there's a darker side to the Brock story? Here's 10 shocking facts about Peter Perfect that Holden fans don't want to hear. Fact number 1. The polarizer controversy nearly destroyed his career. Let's start with the big one, the energy polarizer. In 1987, Brock genuinely believed that a small metal box could improve his race car's performance through energy alignment. Not aerodynamics, not engine tuning, mystical energy fields. The device was created by a self-proclaimed scientist named Eric Dowker, who convinced Brock it could enhance everything from fuel efficiency to driver alertness. Brock was so committed to this pseudoscience that he wanted to fit it to every HDT vehicle coming off the production line. Here's the kicker: Holden's engineers tested the device and found it did absolutely nothing.
There were many concerns, the company claims, but the one which brought the issue to a head was the energy polarizer.
Zero performance gain. But Brock was so convinced, he was willing to stake his entire reputation on it. When Holden refused to approve the polarizer for production cars, Brock went ballistic.
I hear you all talking about Dr. Dowker and energy polarizers, what have you, but absolutely nothing to do.
The fallout was nuclear. Holden terminated their relationship with Brock's HDT operation, ending one of the most successful partnerships in Australian motorsport history. All because their star driver had fallen for what was essentially a very expensive paperweight. Fact number 2. He secretly drove for Ford before his Holden fame. This one's gonna hurt Holden purists. Before becoming Mr. Holden, Peter Brock actually drove for Ford. In the early 70s, he piloted a Ford Escort in rallying and even had a brief stint in Formula Ford with Ford backing. Brock was talented enough that Ford seriously considered him for their touring car program. He was on their radar as a potential star driver who could challenge Holden's dominance. The thought of Brock in a Falcon instead of a Tirana probably gives Holden fans nightmares. What's really interesting is that Brock's early Ford experience taught him a lot about car setup and racing technique. Some of that knowledge he later used to make Holden's cars faster. So in a weird way, Ford helped create the legend that would torment them for decades. Brock himself rarely talked about his Ford days once he became famous with Holden. It didn't fit the narrative of him being a lifelong Holden man. But the records don't lie. Australia's most famous Holden driver once wore Ford colours. Fact number 3. The King of the Mountain title came from relentless self-promotion. Here's something that might surprise you. Brock didn't earn the King of the Mountain nickname through media or fan acclaim. He basically gave it to himself through clever marketing and relentless self-promotion. From the mid-70s onward, Brock was incredibly savvy about building his personal brand. He understood that racing success alone wasn't enough. You needed to create a mythology around yourself. The King of the Mountain persona was carefully crafted to make him seem almost superhuman at Bathurst. While other drivers were focused purely on racing, Brock was thinking about merchandise, personal appearances, and how to position himself as Australia's racing hero. He was arguably the first Australian racing driver to truly understand the power of celebrity marketing. Don't get me wrong, he had the results to back it up. But the legend of Peter Brock was as much about smart marketing as it was about driving talent. He turned himself into a brand in a way that was revolutionary for Australian motorsport. Fact number 4. His first car was an Austin 7, and he nearly died in it. Brock's automotive journey didn't start with powerful race cars. It started with a tiny Austin 7 that almost killed him. As a teenager, he was driving this little car when he had a serious accident that left him hospitalized for weeks. The crash was so severe that doctors weren't sure if he'd ever be able to drive competitively again. His injuries included broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe bruising that took months to heal. For a brief moment, Australia's future racing legend was facing the possibility of never racing at all. What's remarkable is that instead of putting him off racing, the accident made him more determined. He spent his recovery time studying racing techniques, learning about car mechanics, and planning his return to motorsport. The near-death experience actually strengthened his resolve to become a professional driver. The Austin 7 crash also taught him valuable lessons about car safety that he'd carry throughout his career. But it's sobering to think that Australia's greatest racing legend almost never made it past his teenage years. Fact number 5. His military service shaped his racing discipline. Before becoming a racing legend, Brock served in the Australian Army, and this military background profoundly influenced his approach to motorsport. The discipline, attention to detail, and ability to perform under pressure that made him a great racer were all honed during his Army service. Brock's military experience taught him the importance of preparation, teamwork, and following procedures, skills that translated perfectly to professional racing. While other drivers were naturally talented but undisciplined, Brock brought a methodical, almost military precision to his racing. His team members often commented on how Brock approached race weekends like military operations. Everything was planned, everyone had specific roles, and nothing was left to chance. This wasn't just talent, it was systematic excellence learned in the Army. The military connection also explained his famous calmness under pressure. When races got chaotic, Brock seemed to get more focused. That ability to stay cool when everything around him was falling apart was a direct result of his military training. Fact number 6. He wasn't just a driver. He was a brilliant engineer. Here's something that gets overlooked. Brock wasn't just a great driver, he was also a genuinely talented engineer. He could strip down an engine, modify suspension geometry, and improve aerodynamics with the best of them. What made Brock special wasn't just his speed behind the wheel. It was his ability to understand why the car was fast or slow and then do something about it. He'd spend hours in the workshop, getting his hands dirty, working alongside his mechanics to find that extra tenth of a second. Many of the modifications that made HDT Commodores so successful came directly from Brock's engineering brain. He'd feel something wrong with the car during practice, come back to the pits, and explain exactly what needed to be changed. His mechanical sympathy was extraordinary. This engineering knowledge also made him a better driver. He understood the limits of his equipment in a way that pure drivers never could. When he pushed a car to its absolute limit, he knew exactly how much more it could take before something broke. Fact number 7. His safety advocacy came from witnessing too many deaths. Brock's push for better safety standards wasn't just forward-thinking. It was born from the trauma of watching too many friends die in racing accidents. Throughout the 70s and 80s, motorsport was incredibly dangerous, and Brock saw the consequences firsthand. He'd attend too many funerals of fellow racers who died in preventable accidents. Cars with inadequate roll cages, tracks with dangerous barriers, racing suits that offered minimal protection. Brock watched the sport he loved kill people who didn't need to die. His advocacy for better safety equipment, stronger roll cages, and improved track design wasn't popular with everyone. Some saw it as unnecessary expense or making racing too soft. But Brock had seen enough carnage to know that something had to change. The irony is tragic. Despite all his efforts to make racing safer, Brock himself would die in a racing accident in 2006. But his safety advocacy undoubtedly saved countless lives throughout his career. Fact number 8. His 9 Bathurst victories hide some controversial wins. While Brock's 9 Bathurst victories are legendary, not all of them were squeaky clean. Several of his wins came with controversies that Holden fans prefer to forget. In 1979, his win came after a crucial safety car period that perfectly suited his fuel strategy. Some competitors claimed the timing was suspiciously convenient. The 1982 victory involved a disputed pit stop that may have violated regulations, but the protest was dismissed. His 1984 win was overshadowed by the famous rock-throwing incident, where objects were allegedly thrown at rival cars from spectator areas that seemed to favour Holden. While never proven, the timing was awfully convenient for Brock's championship chances. The point isn't that Brock cheated, it's that his victories often came with an edge that went beyond pure driving skill. He was a master of using every advantage, whether it was superior preparation, better tactics, or just plain luck. Fact number 9. His relationship with fans was carefully managed. The image of Brock as the friendly, approachable people's champion was largely accurate, but it was also carefully managed. Behind the scenes, he could be demanding, temperamental, and difficult to work with. Team members who worked with Brock describe a perfectionist who didn't tolerate mistakes or excuses. If you weren't meeting his standards, you'd hear about it. The charming public persona was real, but it was only one side of a complex personality. His media appearances were carefully choreographed to maintain the Peter Perfect image. He understood that fans wanted to see him as the ideal Australian racing hero, so that's exactly what he gave them. The real Brock was more complicated. This isn't to say he was fake, just that he was smart enough to understand the difference between his public and private personas. He gave fans what they wanted while protecting his own privacy and maintaining his competitive edge. Fact number 10. His final race revealed the risks he'd been hiding. Brock's death in 2006 during the Targa West Rally was tragic, but it also revealed something that shocked many fans. At age 61, he was still taking enormous risks that his body couldn't handle. The crash that killed him happened during a relatively straightforward section of the rally. Investigators found that Brock had been pushing beyond his physical limits for months, possibly years. His reflexes had slowed, his vision had deteriorated, but his competitive drive remained as strong as ever. What's most shocking is that people close to Brock knew he was struggling physically, but were afraid to confront him about it. The legend of Peter Brock was so strong that even his friends couldn't bring themselves to suggest he should stop racing. The final tragic irony is that Brock died doing what he loved, but at an age when he probably should have been enjoying retirement. His inability to step back from competition ultimately cost him his life. Peter Brock was undoubtedly a legend. 9 Bathurst wins, countless touring car victories, and a racing legacy that will never be matched. But he was also human, with flaws, controversies, and questionable decisions that Holden fans often prefer to ignore. The polarizer affair, his Ford connections, his self-promotion, and his final tragic race all paint a picture of a more complex man than the sanitized legend suggests. This doesn't diminish his achievements. If anything, it makes them more remarkable. Brock wasn't perfect, but he was real. And sometimes, the real story is more interesting than the legend. These 10 shocking facts don't destroy the Brock mythology. They just add some necessary context to understanding one of Australia's most complex sporting heroes.